Good morning. Welcome to the First Universalist Church of Rochester, where we are called to nurture the spirit and to serve the community. It is good to be together this morning with you all. This is a vibrant and growing church community, and we really want to invite you after this service to please come and join us for coffee hour, just in the Clara Barton Lounge, back through these doors. If you are here visiting us for the first, the second, or the third time, we especially welcome you. Thank you for making your way to this worshiping community. There is a visitor's form that can be found on the back of your order of service, and that can also be found online. If you're joining us online, by clicking the link in the chat, please fill that out so we can offer you a welcome beyond just what we can offer you here in this worshiping space. This morning, it is my privilege and my pleasure to introduce our congregational growth consultant, Reverend Tom Belote. Yay, welcome. And Reverend Tom Belote has been in ministry in the Unitarian Universalism for the last 22 years. He's served two actively growing congregations. And Reverend Tom is my ministry mentor. He was my internship supervisor from 2011 through 2012. And so it's really great to have him here this weekend. He's been doing a workshop with our folks, and we'll also be sticking around after the service today for some conversation and next steps from this Congregational Growth Weekend. So, before we take a moment in here to get to greet one another and to be together and to fellowship for a second, let us take a moment to connect both our folks joining us here in person and our folks joining online. So if you could turn towards Hope, that's where our camera is, and offer a wave to our online folks who are joining us today. We are so grateful you are here with us, wherever you are here from. If you're joining us online, please pop into the chat and offer us a greeting and let us know where you're from. And if you're here in person, please turn to your neighbor and say hello this morning. All right, y'all, let us come back together for singing. Let us come back together to sing together. Our opening hymn this morning is hymn number 128, For All That Is Our Life. Please, if you'd like to follow along in your gray hymnals, you sure can, or the lyrics will be up here on the screen. So please rise in body or in spirit and join us in singing this morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's been a blessing to be here for the last couple of days, meeting and talking and dreaming with leaders in the church and with members of the membership team, and it is so great to be with you here this morning with this beautiful church, and the building is nice too. And before I call us into worship, I just want to say that it's a real honor to be invited to be in the pulpit that is the pulpit of your minister, Reverend Lane May Reed. I've been a fan of Lane May Reed's ministry for many, many years, and it's a great joy to be here. As we prepare to worship, let us hear these words by Lila Ibrahim. They were written when she was an active young adult in our faith. And her words are her answer to how we might express what Unitarian Universalism means in a short statement. This is what Unitarian Universalism means, she writes. It is a blessing that you were born. What each of us knows about God is a piece of the truth. It matters what we do with our lives, and we do not have to do it alone. We do not have to do it alone. In that spirit, come, let us worship together.
Well, thankfully, we do not have to do it alone. And so as we light our chalice here in this space, I'm going to just have a humble moment with you all and let you know I forgot to ask somebody to light the chalice this morning. I apologize. And so since we do not have to do it alone, would someone be willing? Sage, would you be willing to come forward? I am so sorry. Thank you. Sage, you are the best. Thank you. So as Sage, one of our fantastic and fabulous children here, comes forward to light our chalice at First Universalist, and as the folks joining us online light a chalice in your own homes or wherever you are, we invite you all to please join us in our chalice lighting words spoken in unison. May we be a people of welcome, here to grow in heart and mind and spirit, and may we reach out to serve our community. Please rise in body or in spirit for our affirmation of faith, followed by our sung offering. And join us together in these words. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the source and meaning of life. Thus do we covenant with each other and with all. What we need is here. What we need is here. Let's sing it again. What we need is here. What we need is here. Please be seated. Every third Sunday of the month, we lift up an offering for our community. An offering that ties us to the good works going on here in Rochester. An offering in generosity and in gratitude for the justice work and the activism that happens here in our city. The organization that we are supporting for the month of September is the Climate Solutions Accelerator. Their mission is to create a healthier, more equitable, and regenerative community by catalyzing local efforts to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions and address the effects of climate change. Their focus is on organizing and empowering concerned citizens at the local level to facilitate individual action, nurture the development of effective community leaders, and build the power of our local climate movement. If you yourself have been wondering about what you can do around climate change, around what you can do around the ever-evolving ways that we are seeing climate collapse happening around us, this morning you can give. And so we invite you to be generous. Please place your offering in the basket, or you can give online by scanning the QR code on the back of your order of service. If you're joining us online, please click in the link to be generous this morning. This morning's offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you.
So this time in the service is called Conversation, and it's really the time for all ages. So I'm going to speak to any children or youth who may be present, but it's really I'm going to speak to everybody. And so when I came here this weekend, the congregation invited me to come talk about growth, and I thought, well, why don't I talk with the children and youth about growth, because children and youth know so much about growing. I'm going to tell two really quick stories here. First story is a kind of a story we told over and over again in my family, which was when I was in about 4th grade. I needed a new pair of shoes because I had outgrown them, and so we went to the mall, and we went to the first shoe store at one side of the mall. And of course, when you go to the shoe store, what they do, right, as they did back then, was they measure to see what size you are. And they measured me, and I was a size 2, but we didn't like any of the shoes there. And so we walked down to the middle of the mall and went into the next shoe store, and they measured my feet, and they were a size 3 in the middle, and we didn't like any of the shoes there. So we went down to the end of the mall where they measured my feet for a 3rd time, and they said, "You're a size 4.5." And the joke was that my feet had grown two and a half sizes from walking from one side of the mall to the other. In my family, I have a daughter, my wife and I have a daughter who is 11, about to turn 12. She just started middle school, and what she's very excited about, one of the things she's very excited about is how tall she is getting, and she measures herself against her mom. And so there is this moment at the beginning, beginning of the summer or last fall, where she was finally up to her mom's chin. And then there's like constant need to measure. So a couple months later, it's up to the nose, and now up to just about the eyeballs. And she is every day she really wants to be taller than her mom. So children know a lot about growth, but what about church? Are there ways that the church helps us to grow? The church may not make our feet bigger, may not make us taller, but are there ways of growing that we learn here in church? If I would have people call out an answer, and I could repeat it if there's. Are there other ways of growing? It's growing in our spirituality, in our hearts, in how open in our spirituality, and in how open our hearts are to others. Are there other ways? In learning, we grow in our minds. Yeah. And our chosen family, who we consider family, might get larger from being together. Yes. Our outreach, we grow in our ability to make a difference in the community in which we're situated, in which we live, right? So church may not help us to grow, may not make us have bigger shoes, may not make us taller, but even when our feet stop growing and we stop getting taller, we still grow in all sorts of other ways. For my daughter, who is 11 going on 12, a big piece of growth has been that this year she takes the bus, and when she gets off the bus, she walks and she unlocks the door, and she comes in by herself, which is she's grown enough to do that. And so there's ways in which when we grow, there's more responsibilities that we can take on and more that we can do. And of course, our hearts and spirits grow as well. So in that spirit of thinking about growth, the growth that children know so much about and the growth that happens all throughout our lives, we're going to sing our doxology together and move on.
Yeah, we'll sing our doxology together. And if any children want to make their way upstairs for our children's programs, you sure can. So let us sing together. Please be seated as we prepare our hearts and our minds for the sharing of the joys and the sorrows of our gathered community. If you would like to, you can place a hand over your heart to be able to listen from a heart-centered space. And as Tom comes forward to place stones in a bowl, no worries. I will... We're doing this together. None of us are alone. As Tom comes forward to place stones into a bowl, I will read aloud the joys and the sorrows of our gathered community. All who are online are also invited to share joys and sorrows in the chat, and we'll read them aloud here in this space. So, we share a sorrow this morning from Richard Reed. Yesterday, a friend in my apartment building, Jim Degnan, am I pronouncing that correctly, passed away.
So we're holding Jim and all those who live in the same building as Richard and all those who knew and loved him in our hearts this morning. We share joy this morning from Kitty Forbush, who just went on a road trip with her son, Cooper, and it was an absolute joy. We are sharing in the joys of being together with our children. We share joy and a sorrow, sort of a mix, it sounds like, from Patty Goodwin. A sorrow that that one of her teachers who was in hospice died last Sunday night. And yesterday she went to the AME Zion Church with many of her students, past and present, for the most beautiful going home service for her. So honoring this life, honoring this teacher, we are with you, Patty. We share a joy from Nancy Gady, who is spending a few days visiting her grandchildren in North Carolina, and she looks forward to seeing us next week. We are thinking of you, Nancy, as you are there with your grandchildren. And as we just hold that we know every single person in here is coming with some form of joy and sorrow on our hearts, we will drop one final stone into the bowl to represent all of the joys and the sorrows that remain in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts. May all be held in the heart of love this morning. As our community has been holding for the past year, really, we hold that we are a worshiping community that is worshiping in a time of war. We acknowledge the wars happening and conflicts in Israel, Palestine, the Ukraine, Congo, Sudan. We acknowledge that there are more conflicts and wars happening that we are not even aware of, and we earnestly pray this morning and pause on the forming edge of our lives to pray for these wars to cease. Each Sunday we light a white candle to acknowledge the grief that accompanies times when our world is at war and in conflict, the grief that comes from the loss, the death, the loss of the ways of life that those who are directly affected experience. We connect our sense of grief and loss, personally felt, with those who are experiencing this now due to war. And we light a yellow candle each Sunday morning when we gather to acknowledge the tenacity of the human spirit, the brief moments of joy and celebration found in times of war and conflict as well, those sustaining forces. We connect our felt sense of joy with the joy that sustains all life. And so let us pause and take a brief moment of silence to acknowledge the many deaths, the many losses, the many joys, both known and unknown, that have happened this past week due to war. May we continue to hold in our minds, in our spirits, in our hearts, and in our actions ways that these wars may cease. Amen. Blessed be. May it be so. I want to invite you now into a moment of prayer with me. And so take a moment to just get comfortable in your seats, whether it's here in a pew or you're on your couch or wherever you are worshiping from this morning. allow your weight to be held by your seat. Allow your shoulders to roll down. Close your eyes, soften your gaze. Take a deep breath with me as we prepare our hearts for prayer this morning. As we offer up the prayers of our hearts on the altar of this community held here as human beings who come out of many experiences, many locations, many lives, stitched together this morning by our desire to connect to one another and to something larger than ourselves. Deepest love, Spirit of all, we bring our hearts to this space that are celebrating this morning. We bring the joys, the experiences of delight. We bring gratitude for the beauty that we are surrounded by. Fresh from milestones in our lives, worthy of praise. We lift up gratitude for the joys in our hearts. We acknowledge that we bring hearts to this space in transition, experiencing changes in our lives, some joyful, others difficult to navigate. Our lives are always changing. And as we sit here together, we pray for guidance for the next available move, for what can be done right now and in the moments to come. We bring hearts to this space that are grieving, holding loss, grief, both fresh and long-standing, remembering those we miss, sitting with the pain of severed relationships and ties being cut. We make space to acknowledge our grief. And we bring hearts to this space holding those we know who are sick. Those in the hospital, those living with long-term illness, those who are struggling with addiction, those who are caregivers, whose hands and hearts do the work of tending to loved ones. We hold space here for those that we carry with us who are sick and in need of care. Each heart held here together in this space, each joy and sorrow held by a larger love, larger than ourselves. We lift up the prayers of our hearts here that all who are grieving will be comforted, that all who are experiencing sickness will find healing, that those who are in transition will be carried through, and that all who are joyfully celebrating have space to fully experience the joy that makes life worth living and that can see us through difficult times. Let us sit for a moment in silence with the prayers of our own hearts. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. Dear ones, as we continue our prayer through song, a hymn of contemplation sung from our seats this morning is hymn number 402, From You I Receive. A reminder this morning that it is in the giving and the receiving of care and love that we come here to this community. So as we sing, we will sing this 3 times through. It's very short. And I'll invite you to turn and look upon the faces of your neighbor as a reminder that we are here both to receive and to give in this beautiful community together.
So I'd like to begin my remarks this morning by offering a reading. The reading comes from a report published by the Surgeon General of the United States. We have a broad definition of Holy Writ. The report was titled "The Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation," published in the spring of 2023. And I invite you to hear these words from the introduction by Surgeon General Vivek Murthy. He writes, "When I first took office as Surgeon General in 2014, I didn't view loneliness as a public health concern. But that was before I embarked on a cross-country listening tour where I heard stories from my fellow Americans that surprised me. People began to tell me they felt isolated, invisible, and insignificant. Even when they couldn't put their finger on the word lonely, time and time again, people of all ages and all socioeconomic backgrounds from every corner of the country would tell me, I have to shoulder all life's burdens by myself, or if I disappear tomorrow, no one will even notice." Dr. Murthy continued that in the scientific literature, I found confirmation of what I was hearing. In recent years, about 1 in 2 adults in America reported experiencing loneliness. Loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal health. Loneliness is associated with greater risk of cardiovascular disease, dementia, stroke, depression, anxiety, and premature death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by smoking 15 cigarettes a day. If you read his report, you're left with a really sobering picture of our challenges as a nation. 1 in 2 Americans suffers from loneliness and disconnection. The impact of social isolation on our health is the same as being nearly a pack-a-day smoker. Young adults are a demographic that is at highest risk for loneliness, and the percentage of young adults who say they struggle with loneliness has increased every single year from 1976 to 2019. And that was before the pandemic. The report also considers the way that social isolation is experienced by different segments of the population. by people of color, within the LGBTQ community, by people who experience discrimination, by survivors of violence, by people living in rural areas. Beyond the 2023 report from the Surgeon General, numerous other studies have focused on the loneliness epidemic among men and how men are lagging in friendships, connections, and relationships. Indeed, no segment of our society, young, middle-aged, or old, all races, urban, suburban, and rural, queer and straight, wealthy, middle class, and poor, red, purple, and blue, no segment of our society is unimpacted by the epidemic of loneliness and isolation. When we come to church, we come with the challenges of the world ever with us, right? We come with an awareness of wars raging. We come with an awareness of the devastation being wrought by global climate change. We come with an awareness of the threats to our democracy. The world is ever with us, and it is exhausting. And we often wonder, what difference can one individual make? Can one congregation make? Can one very, very small religious denomination make? But what if I were to tell you right here in Rochester that you have the answer, the solution, the cure to a public health crisis, to an epidemic that's making us sick and shortening our lives? And what if I were to tell you that this solution would not require backbreaking labor or extraordinary effort or the acquisition of specialized knowledge? In fact, it's already a solution and an answer that you have and possess. Indeed, you have the answer, the solution, the cure right here. And do you know how I know this? Let me tell you about a conversation I once had. True story. From time to time during my first ministry in Kansas City, I would go after an evening meeting. I would go down to a bar in Kansas City, have a beer, and watch a few innings of a baseball game. One evening, as I was doing this, I noticed a man sitting a few seats down, similar age to me. And as people tend to do, we struck up a bit of a conversation. He asked me what I did for work, and I told him that I was a Unitarian Universalist minister serving a church in the Kansas suburbs. The man, his jaw dropped, he slapped the bar, he laughed out a roar of laughter, and he turned to me and said, "We meet at last." This was not what I was expecting. He then turned to me and explained that he worked as a counselor, a therapist, and that many of his patients, his clients, he explained, struggled with social anxiety and with challenges making connections and with their experience of loneliness. And then he told me that he frequently recommended to his clients that they check out the Unitarian Universalist Church. He then got kind of serious and looked me in the eye and said, "I send them to your community because your community is the best I know at practicing acceptance and inclusion and welcome. And you're the best community I know of that can embrace people with all their quirks and rough edges and insecurities. What you do is so important." I was speechless, which for a minister is rare. The counter was totally surreal and such a HIPAA violation. But this encounter left me kind of shook or seeing things with new perspectives. Like what I thought I had been doing one thing as a minister, and that we had been doing something as a church, but it turns out that there was this other thing that was happening amidst us and among us that I kind of had no idea about, but was so important. One of the things I've done a bunch of times during my years of ministry is something that I call the preaching practicum. It's a class that I offer to members of my congregation. It's a 6 weeks intensive preaching course for lay people on how to write and prepare and deliver a sermon. And I used to joke that the number of people I got to sign up for the course would be the number of weeks that I would take off in the summer. Or not joke, that was actually how I did it, the number of people I could get to sign up. One year, a few years ago, one of the people to sign up for this class was a woman in my congregation named Susan. Susan's probably the most dedicated volunteer I've ever worked with, or one of them. She has served on every committee in the church, has held every leadership role, has launched a bevy of groups that she has organized and launched. She said she signed up for the preaching practicum class because it was the one thing she hadn't done yet. I'll never forget her sermon. She got up and ticked through a list of her various volunteer roles and said, "You may be wondering why I've taken on all these volunteer roles. I do it because I am very selfish. Studies show that those who are active in a church community live longer. Why don't we put that fact out there? Why don't we communicate what this community is really worth? It's worth more than we realize. In fact, one study reports that church involvement is correlated to a 4-year increase in life expectancy. Church involvement is correlated to a 4-year increase in life expectancy. No wonder many of our congregations are a little gray. We're smart. We have no idea what we are worth. As Vivek Murthy writes, loneliness is far more than just a bad feeling. It harms both individual and societal well-being, is associated with greater risk of heart disease and dementia, of stroke and depression, of anxiety and death. The mortality impact of being socially disconnected is similar to that caused by being a pack-a-day smoker. So on Friday night and on Saturday in the afternoon, I met with leaders of this church to talk about welcoming and membership, and met with board members and committee chairs and the membership committee and greeters and ushers. And those who attended these sessions heard one of my mantras that I repeat over and over again, which is that nobody ever visits a church by accident. I believe nobody ever visits a church by accident, and I would add that nobody ever visits a church for frivolous reasons. Nobody is ever like, I'm bored with brunch. I think I'm going to go to church to see if the coffee is good. By the way, you do have good coffee. I learned that yesterday. You've got really good coffee. People visit a church because there is a deep longing, a yearning, often a pain in our lives. We're seeking community, or we're seeking a cure for the epidemic of loneliness and isolation and disconnection, or we're working through grief and sorrow, through failure, pain, and loss, as our opening hymn put it. Or we want something more for our lives and for our families and for our relationships. I once had a member of my church join. This member was middle-aged, and he got very involved quickly. He sang in the choir. He took over the church gardening. He served as board president after just a few years of membership. He even took my preaching practicum class. And he became deeply, deeply connected with the church community, that type of soul who was there every single week. One day he came to meet with me in my office. He sat down and he told me that he had a secret to tell me. A secret that had even been a secret to himself for many years, and a secret that he was now keeping from his family and his community. He was a gay man, and it was time for him, he said to me, it was time to live into his truth, the truth of who he was. His coming out, he shared with me, would end his marriage, of course. He might lose his family. He very well might lose his job. He might lose everything, but he would gain himself. And that was a risk, he told me, that he was willing, he had to take. "Oh, friend," I said to him, "Oh, friend, here you are so beloved. Here you are held in deepest love. This community will support you unconditionally. We will cheer you on, we will have your back." And we did. And we did. Nobody ever comes to a church by accident. Church community is worth more than any of us understand. There is a power with connection. There is a power to connection. I close this morning with these words by the United States Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who writes, "If we fail to confront the epidemic of loneliness and isolation, we will pay an ever-increasing price in the form of our individual and collective health and well-being. We will continue to splinter and divide until we can no longer stand as a community or as a country. And instead of coming together to take on the great challenges before us, we will further retreat to our lonely corners, angry and sick and alone." Loneliness and isolation, Murthy writes, represent profound threats to our health and well-being, but we have the power to respond. By taking small steps every day to strengthen our relationships and our connections and our community, we can build lives and communities that are healthier, that are happier, and we can be sure that our world is better poised than ever to take on the challenges that lay ahead. As a community, you have this power of connection, this power to bless the world, this power to take on the challenges that lie ahead. You are already doing it. Amen. Blessed be. The closing hymn that we're going to sing this morning is a favorite of mine. It is "Love Will Guide Us." And this morning as we sing it, there's going to be an extra verse. So the first verse begins, "Love will guide us." The second verse begins, which I love because I can't, "If you cannot sing like angels," which I feel is personally written for me. The third verse, when the third verse comes, don't go right to your hymnal, look up, because there's going to be a third verse, and then we're going to sing the closing verse, which is "Love Will Guide Us" again. So I invite you to rise, whether in body or in spirit, and to sing out our closing hymn this morning. In Chapel Hill, we say these chalice extinguishing words every week as well. Please join with me in saying them. We extinguish this flame, but we keep its light in our hearts with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. Friends, go forth, treasuring community, treasuring our connections and our relationships. Go forth knowing that these are life-giving, that they are powerful, they bless our own lives and bless the world. Go forth giving thanks for our connections, and always leaving that circle a little open for those wishing to step inside. Go in love and in peace and in hope and in faith. Amen, and blessed be.